Hello, and welcome back to this channel. In the previous video, we covered the hang-ups of kill cure. In that video, I brought up Lapse as an example of the few experiences I've had, and that I would leave my thoughts about it for another time. That time is now. Lapse is one of the few works that are interesting not only because of its negatives, but also because it is the only finished thing because the positives it has work in spite of the things holding back this work. It's a real diamond in the rough, and I would like to tell you why. Before I start though, I obviously have to warn you of spoilers of the game. Because we are going to be covering it in its entirety, I would highly recommend you check it out, as, I'll be honest, the best works are the ones you want to improve. It's about 5 hours, judging from the length of the footage I've recorded. If you are planning to play it though, stick around for a second so I can tell you something important. For whatever reason, this game does not have any way to sort through the chapters without manually saving. This will matter to you because there are alternate endings you can obtain, and once you clear them, you don't reset back to the point you choose them, you just get booted back to the menu. That's all I have to say for you though. Have fun! And for those who want to get spoiled regardless, it's your life. Without much preparation outside of a starting quote, we start off the prologue with us waking up in an unknown room. After turning off the alarm, we washed ourselves up to get a first good look at our protagonist. This is Ikebukuro, and they're non-binary, if you can tell by the first name. It's one of the few representations I like. Honestly, a lot of these representations are very good. You could poke and prod at some unnatural stuff like eye colors, but I wouldn't even go that far. If you're wondering why I haven't shared their profession or talent, it's because they're an average person. Not even as a lottery winner of the project that deems ultimate titles, but just a rando, whose only ultimateness is an affiliation with Ashley, Horseshoe. And they're not even aware of that for now. We retrace our steps and find ourselves at the moment we drop Ashley off, and you'll come to notice that Echo is quick to blame themselves and is generally anxious regarding their best friend's well-being. So anxious, in fact, they immediately run out of the room and bump into Ash. Literally. With this reunion, they find themselves relaxed, and it's easy to believe their long history together. After exchanging about the same information, they hear voices down the hall and go off to meet the others. At the foyer, we see 3 people, but before we make our introductions, we have to sign in using our bracelets. If you wonder why this CG might look familiar to you, it's because it's almost a one-to-one to the bracelets from 999. If you can't tell already from the illustration on one of the characters we'll meet shortly, this author really loves Zero Escape.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device.
The funnier part about this is that Missy Vesper has a choker with its design. You'd think it was going towards Your Turn to Die's collar system. But enough about that. We meet Archon Papiano, Missy, and Canonota. Lapse makes the interesting decision to not immediately highlight the talents of these characters we meet, nor the concepts of the Ultimates yet, and we'll see it in the introductions at the dining hall. We get introduced to the Preservation Project, made for Ultimate students. Shocked by the voluntary decision to sign up to come here, we come to learn Ash's talent previously mentioned. Boom! It not only reintroduces, but also adds a future point of contention with the two for withholding that info. Combine that with the chime-ins from other characters present, it's genuinely a great bit of storytelling. Even though Art and Vesper here don't get the same treatment since they are purely one-to-one between them and Echo, it's still really effective. Unfortunately though, I feel like this is the most effective the writing gets with introductions. Moving on, we find out Art is a peppy golfer, and Vesper, calm tactician. Compared to Art's official title, Vesper's is slightly more ambiguous for what she actually does. Political campaigning. We won't know what Canon's talent is for a bit because she decided to explore on her own, so put a pin on that for now. We go towards the study and meet Sei, a timid watchmaker, with some very funny foreshadowing about our next character. Cirrus Syriac, the ultimate charisma. Yes, that is his name. It's implied that this isn't actually his name later on, but you'll come to find that in both official documentation and his bracelet, they both have that name listed. Okay, present mirror here. You'll know later on that I had actually reached out to the creator, mythridate, to ask some clarifying questions, and one of them was about this. mythridate responded back by saying that his name was confirmed later on in Chapter 2's trial. The only problem is, this didn't really answer my question of what the actual name of Cyrus that Zero hinted towards. I'm chalking this up to not wording what I asked properly, so if you're watching, Feel free to let me know. Unless I misunderstood your answer and that was actually supposed to be his real name, my life is hell. We head on to the theater to see two people arguing about something, and one trying to de-escalate. About what, you might ask? If you can't tell, the creator really likes Zero Escape. Anyways, we're introduced to Fort Solo, an opera singer, Pandora Esper, a baker, and Lyle Termino, an ultimate puzzle master. There's not much to say about them, so I'd like to go into a brief tangent about translation. You'll see some characters say a phrase in their native language, and there are a few ways to tell what it means. You can have a glossary like Chaos Head that explains it for you. The translation could be written above the untranslated text, or just translate it all together. Lapse makes the decision to translate it post-mortem by telling you in the logs. It's better than no translation for those who aren't aware of what they mean, but they make the reading experience slightly more awkward. Going back to the story, I'd like to highlight something that I notice among some visual novels. After meeting the trio in the theater, Ashley and Echo talk to each other about what they were like. There's not really much purpose to these conversations other than acknowledging what the audience saw as what they also saw. In my opinion, I find this to be a bit of bloat. You're better off just showing and not telling. After that though, we go back to the halls of the living quarters to banter about how Ash never brought up her title, with an answer equivalent to a "you never asked." We're told that since it's 9 AM, we can explore the second floor until 7 PM, and are invited by Pandora to look around together after getting some pastries from her. She's really nice, if you can't tell. I'll tell you right now, I think the section where we explore the second floor is weaker, but that's not to say it's bad. There aren't any new characters, and in its place there's bonding with the trio we currently have, along with questions regarding the matter of ultimates and how they maintain their skills and whatnot. It's good for what it is. On the second floor though, we have the spa lounge, the climbing center, and the jazz club. Oh, what's this clip of Echo flubbing an instrument doing here? Anyways, we meet up with everyone else at the atrium where, surprise surprise, we don't actually get the reveal of the killing game yet. It's just us being welcomed to the apothegm. Even though this is a sign of relaxation for the others, Echo begins to feel that they don't belong, thinking that they took up a slot for someone more qualified. They head down by themselves to the foyer, and have their picture taken by Canon. She talks about her niche of photography, Rukin figure, back figure basically. She doesn't expect us to understand, and we don't betray her expectations. It's not really elaborated on further, and not even the short stories, yes they exist by the way, involve Canon or who she is. At the very least, Echo now confirms that Canon is an ultimate student, the ultimate furniture, the ultimate photographer, a proud introvert. Knowing that for certain Echo is an anomaly, this sends them over the edge, and they attempt to rush out of the front door, only to be shocked and proceed to pass out. We wake up later to find Forte watching over us, and discuss what just happened. Forte attempts to comfort us, but it doesn't seem to really go through to Echo. We go down to the dining hall to relay the same thing again, and the group decides what to do next. But before we proceed on investigating the front door, we're told that the day will end soon, and in an hour, the lights will shut. Ash stops us before we leave, acknowledging that Echo felt hurt by being left in the dark. It's a pretty real moment. Before we go to our room though, we see Art and Lyle chatting it up about their own plans tomorrow. Art brings up the idea of our predicament as an escape room, and Lyle, an ARG. Not sure why Lyle will call it that, so I'm with Art here. We say our goodbyes, and head to our bed to stew on it. And thus ends the first day, with an uneasy feeling about what's coming next. For Echo, I mean. We all know what's happening, but you almost forget it. We wake up on the next day, and Ash knocks at our door to check on us. We move down to see Sai and Lyle in the foyer, and head towards the dining hall to Pandora, setting pastries on the dining table. The group continues the discussion from last night, and we move forward with investigating. After that, we head to the theater to ask Forte where Canon went after she saw us getting fried by the door. He tells us that she went to the second floor after, and we look to see why she did. In the process of that though, we see a message at the kiosk from Art. I guess I glossed over that, huh? There are kiosks on every floor, and they can exchange messages. Anyways, what did he say? Aw, thanks. We see her at the atrium, but before we could ask her anything, an announcement rings to meet there for, an announcement. The rest gather. We go through our standard spiel about this premise. We've been here before, with the exception of the time frame, shortening to a span of 7 days, and being promised the ultimate prize once someone wins. After bickering where Lyle implicates someone as a mole, we end the prologue with a neat opening. Wait, the Game Master's called Zero? Really?
Foreshadowing as an
We'll leave that for later, but it's time to answer the burning question you've had since this video started. What the fuck is the Prologue test? The Prologue test is completely arbitrary, but it's a way I gauge these fan games, and I view it as this. Is this piece of work good enough to hold up on its own? Does it follow the same story beats without much deviation? Is there something you can look forward to? Is this not the same shit over again? I think with Lapse, the answer is yeah. Certainly, the alterations to the premise won't be ones that we'll see until the next installment, but the existing character dynamics are interesting to discuss and theorize about. Regardless, even if you found the prologue lacking, you'll be more than fulfilled, as a month and a half later, Chapter 1 released. Well, that sucks. We have the expected aftermath after the announcement. Our jokes, Vesper copes, and she asks us to continue investigating. We end up in the living quarters hallway shortly after, and we ask to be left alone after conversing with Ash. We go back to our room and have a recap? Yeah, this is just a quiz with the task of you remembering what's what. I imagine it might have been appropriate at the time, as keep in mind, Lapse was in the full release and had been coming out episodically. Despite that, I feel this recap is a bit awkward. I understand that later on, this theme of memory and recalling will become important later on, but the information that is used doesn't really feel worthy of what this moment is probably on paper. Moving on, we fall asleep and the next day, we eavesdrop in the dining hall after finding no one in the foyer, where we see Pandora give her sister's watch to say, and after that, we get our sort of free time event. It's more of a decide who you want to hear first than anything, but I imagine that was a potential engine limitation or creative liberty. I'll spare you the details of what happens here, as it's more characterization and world building, and I think that is fine. My thoughts on it are about the same as the initial introductions in the prologue. We go back to our room and leave for the dining hall, not before seeing Sai and Kanan leaving from it. We have another meeting with Vesper, Cyrus, Art, and Ash, and we head back to our rooms with Ash, not before having a talk before we enter our rooms. She shoulders the blame for Echo being in this, since their school album is placed next to their room, signaling that Echo's presence is intentional. Keeping this in mind, she decides that she's going to keep distance from us, much to both of their dismay. Ashley returns to her room, and we meet Pandora. She comes to us to discuss a note that she has where it says that if you recognize the symbol on the note, your safety is ensured, and to maintain secrecy regarding it. After that, though, we have a talk about what happened with Ash, and we go back to bed. I won't go on again about the process of waking up here, so we'll skip on to the dining hall, where after we get some pastries to our liking thanks to Ash's recommendations, Zero elaborates on the rules and puts out a forced motive question that asks everyone if their title truly reflects who they are. Lastly, if the groups keep boycotting the murders, they will all suffer collective punishment and have Complex 53 injected. It's okay, I'm sure that's the end of the referential plot devices. Anyways, the group discusses the question posed onto them with varying answers, and the result not instigating or having any immediate fallout. As Pandora says, our talents really do reflect on who we are, and to separate it from us is to remove a core part of ourselves. The group disperses from the dining hall, and we're heartwarmingly invited by Art to tag along while discussing the motive with the others that weren't present with us. This one is a more effectively written free time event, seeing as we're not only gathering specific info, but also going around and seeing how Art ticks, so to speak. After that process though, we stumble onto Lyle, and we are shoved into the role of the third wheel, as Art pushes the boundaries a little too hard on Lyle with the question. They quickly make up though, and Lyle motions us to head down to the foyer door to let us know of two things. 1. The door isn't electrified anymore, but we still can't leave. And 2. Shay also has a similar note as Pandora. Well, only we know that, but we don't divulge that. Lyle brings up, it's okay. It's probably not the actual solution to anything. We say our goodbyes to the duo, and pass the time by ourselves in the study. Once 4 PM hits though, Zero decides that he wants to annoy you, and bothers you with the same music that pierced your ears during Chapter 1's murder boycott in Danganronpa V3. We run out to the foyer and see a shadowy figure from the second floor. We go upstairs trying to find anyone to talk to, and we find Pandora resting in the spot lounge. We gently reach out to her, and we realize that this is in fact a death game we're in. We rush out to gather Cyrus and Kanan, and like so, the first investigation starts. We get the Monokuma file, not sure why we're sticking to that titling, and the rest rush in. Echo psychs themselves up with a reminder that someone killed her, and thus we begin. All in all, a very solid moment. My only gripe is that the passage of time between the study and the music is hard to measure, but this is still very good for what it is. You've probably noticed just by skimming the scene before we get to anything else, there's not a lot of moving parts in this murder. If you think the note in the pool is important, it isn't. There's really only the knowledge of the murder method and the time of death. You can figure the rest of this out via alibis or some subtle tells that the culprit will spill out by accident. If it sounds like I'm saying that this is poorly constructed, rest easy, as I'm not criticizing the complexity of this murder. The real highlight of this mystery will shine once we get to the trial, but to put it simply, this murder focuses more on the emotions, and I think it's done pretty well. I don't want to bore you too much with the investigation process, because most of the information gathered will be in the trial. But just keep in mind that Canon and Cyrus didn't immediately see anyone. At least, that's what they tell us. We head to the courtroom, and after taking our stands, Zero graces us with his digital presence. Presentation-wise, this is beautiful work, from the crest to the prime discussions we'll see later on. Zero's introduction is natural enough here to not make things awkward for those who are already aware of how things go, and after a threat by yours truly, Vesper gets the ball rolling by addressing alibis up until the murder. The problem is, no one has a solid alibi until 3 PM, an hour before the murder actually happens. We switch on to the topics of the question forced on us, and the first discussion commences. Lapse makes an interesting decision regarding non-stop debates and how the general flow goes. Most of these discussions are not adversarial, and more often than not, they'll end up clicking with a statement that's noteworthy rather than biting back on a misconception or an outright lie. It's a change that's very welcome, and removes a lot of the bloat that the mainline games had with the issue of creating absurd contentions, to the point of making up ghosts in the first mainline game.
But Kyoko's standing right there.
No, that's a ghost!
But she has legs and stuff.
Well, that's just because she's like the latest evolution in ghost technology.
I'm gonna have to be an ass here though. I never recorded the audio for this footage in the interest of saving space, but whenever you advance on the right statement, the sound effect that plays is the same one that plays in the mainline games when you hit the wrong statement. It's bizarre, and it creates a weird disconnect with what's actually happening. Anyways, after a bit of back and forth, Zero throws a bone, saying that someone had to hate Pandora, despite her unassuming and kind attitude. It's not a bad idea to get your game master involved, but in the case of Lapse, more often than not, Zero will chip in with certain nudges that, to be frank, the group would likely figure out with their existing brain capacity. And then Lyle hits everyone with a curveball, saying that the initial group that discovered the body are potential culprits. It's a cool moment, and there's even a line where Lyle takes a jab at a potential theory as to the why done it. It's just a bit hampered down by the reveal of the alibis until 3 PM being already treaded ground. The group then proceeds to discuss alibis from 4 PM, and we come to find out that Lyle was in the jazz club, an area that was soundproof. The evidence to justify this is pretty neat in the prologue where Echo absolutely fucks up a cello. Zero then proceeds to meddle, I'm calling it that because this is completely unjustified, meddles with the discussion and throws another bone that actually just derails the trial. Zero? I hate that guy. We then get onto the topic of the murder weapon, and come to figure out that the towel on Pandora's chair was the murder weapon. There's a question of why Pandora was so relaxed during all the chaos, and then Art has a Freudian slip. Yeah, this guy's cooked. Zero then meddles, again, with a clue that would likely be solved by the group if they'd been given the space to. Seriously, this guy can't keep getting away with this. We get back onto the topic of the notes, and have another memory sequence, and after that, a new sequence where we think backwards, and recall the moment when Art self-reports on himself. It's a cool sequence. It almost hides the fact that it just amounts to Echo remembering one line. Anyways, Echo accuses Art with this information, and Lyle asserts himself to defend Art. It's a reasonable and expected reaction, although in my opinion, the lack of build-up with this outburst makes this a little odd delivery-wise, to the point where Lyle just tells an obvious lie. It's a fine idea, but the execution feels lacking. After that though, we get to the why done it, where Art elaborates on his agency and interest in golf, and realizing from the question posed upon the group that his enjoyment lies completely with avoiding his talent. It's a very real feeling, and it makes the last conversation Pandora had with Art much more heartbreaking. Give meaning in that vapid life. You can guess what happens next, and it's not an easy read. I think it has the same issue with Lao's outburst, but to a lesser degree, where I think there just needed to be a final push. The ramblings that happen after the flashback ends are just too jumbled to give a real breaking moment, if you can get what I mean. Art apologizes to Lyle, and despite my gripes, I still love this scene. And then Canon drops a nuke of photographed evidence. We get to the voting stage, and Art gets voted out and then executed by Schrodinger's bear. Was he attacking, or was he using Art as a golf ball? We'll never know. Zero is ecstatic from this moment that he tells us that no matter what happens, the infrastructure in the apothegm ensures that we won't be interrupted. I forgot to say this, but once the time of execution comes, a faceless character named Eve appears and lays it on thick against Zero. Despite the despair Zero brought on, they say Echo is one of the few slivers of hope and gives them the title of Ultimate Memory. I agree with Zero here. What the hell were they thinking? Before court is officially adjourned though, Zero warns us about Cyrus, saying that him being an ultimate charisma is obviously fake. Before we can elaborate on that though, we keel over from mental exhaustion and chapter 1 ends. All in all, a solid chapter with some few mishaps. So what lessons can we take away? First and foremost, you think this sounds like sarcasm, but I mean this with all seriousness. You do not need to have a complex mystery, you just need to have an effectively told story. Although chapter 2 further takes advantage of this idea, I still think that Art is a very iconic example. Second, you can deviate from the tradition with how trials flow. Even with Lao's nonsense at the end, it's not one that you'll have to really entertain, and is shut down before you'll have to shoot a bullet at her or anything of the sort. And finally, have some moderation with how many interventions you have with the trial flow. I know that Eve made a note that Zero was meddling, but I view that more with the executions, and if you have faith in your characters, let them figure things out on their own. It'll make those moments of intervention much more impactful. If you thought this was good though, buckle up, because we're going straight into chapter 2. We wake up back in Ashley's room, with Vesper letting us know that it's now evening on the same day. Echo takes notice of the helmet Ashley has on her cabinet, and she tells us about her best friend, Silver Prower, a race car driver, over the authenticity of the preservation project. She apologizes to Echo for distancing herself in a naive idea of making things naturally better. Vesper reads the room and offers to go down and get something to eat, and Echo says fuck that, and when asked about an alternative, they suggest the first thing everyone tried to do. This isn't a slight against the writing, by the way, I just think Echo's a little too harsh. Harsh to the point, in fact, that they press a button about the usefulness of their talents. In the end, we go down and stumble into Forte, and have a moment of bonding. Vesper brings an idea to no longer travel alone, and now that Cyrus's cover talent got exposed, the group fills us in with the aftermath, and we come to know that he's the confidential informant responsible for us being here. If you think that his dialogue is a bit excessive, I would agree. At first. You know how some games do that thing? You know the one, where they adopt an overly sultry voice?
Well done, Junpei. As you so correctly deduced.
Oh my god.
This is intentional, but we'll get to the why later. Just know that somehow, this is one of the few times where it was justified. I don't know if I'm still fine with this, to be honest. Sai and Kennen aren't responding. You can probably guess how Lyle feels. With that, we're now fully catched up. Vesper brings up that a third floor has opened up, and we follow her to see what it has in store for us. Although there are new amenities, the more pressing matter comes from the living quarters, where there are emblems next to the doors that hint at more participants in this death game, including one from Silva. And then Cyrus shows up again, telling us that the people they're looking for are nowhere to be found. With that lingering in the air, he leaves. This fucking guy. We decide to call it quits, and head back to our own rooms, but not before seeing Cannon in the foyer. We talk to her for a short while about why she ran from our electrocution, and she chalks it up to intuition. Not much beyond that though. We say our goodbyes and move on to the next day. We wake up from Vesper knocking at our door. She gathers anyone who is willing to hear an announcement of hers. She sets a gun down with a note which talks about reverse Russian roulette, with only one chamber empty. She came to the idea to leave it here to put faith in us all, to trust her in turn. It's a nice idea, but considering Cyrus slowly walking with his hands in his pockets, I still wouldn't do this. I recognize that this is a Chekhov's gun disguised as a trust exercise, but this is incredibly short-sighted from a tactician. The idea that she hadn't thought of shooting the bullets in front of everyone is a bit egregious, and if you have any worries about that, it's not like you couldn't find a loophole around it. This is a weird mix of the writing not being the best, the aspect of moving parts, and Vesper as a result being affected by that. Anyways, after reaching a consensus to not use the gun, we are interrupted by Lyle breaking everything in the dining hall to test the limits. He comes to the conclusion that nobody would have had to do anything seeing as he didn't get punished, and runs off. We get our daily dose of motives, this time being the question of if your talent has any tangible benefit. After running out to follow Lyle to no avail, we see Cyrus at the top of the foyer, doing the same old shit. This time though, Vesper confronts him in private. Trusting in our friend, we continue what we were doing yesterday and explore the third floor in its entirety. Like before though, there's not much going on here, so we'll skip by the smoke lounge, casino, and art gallery. We end off the tour in the garage, where we find Silva's car, and we step out to talk with Vesper about what transpired. Unfortunately, his shell has cracked. She theorizes the obvious, that Cyrus was at his most sincere before the reveal. She suggests that we go ahead and interrogate him? Sure, why not? We go down with Ash at the climbing center and gather rope, and in the middle of that, we hear a gunshot. We run up to hear another, and Ash proceeds to shove us into the art gallery for our own safety, to the point of using said rope to keep the door shut on her side. Echo gets the idea of leaving through the side door that the art gallery has, but it's no use. They can only sit there until someone else can unlock the door for them as they keep hearing gunshots. We eventually get freed by Sai and Lyle, and stumble onto the smoking lounge to find Cyrus dead, Nate at the casino, and Ashley unconscious and injured? We'll also get to that later. If you think I'm really skimming now, I'm not. Comparing the time for a murder to occur between Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is about 50 minutes in difference. Seriously, things escalate really fast, and I feel like part of it was the arbitrary 7 days limit set early on. I imagine this could have transitioned smoother if you at least give the story another week, but that's not exactly as captivating of a premise, is it? Moving on to the investigation, you might think that this is the most layered murder so far, and you'd be wrong. There really aren't a lot of moving parts. You could argue that you only need 2 pieces of evidence to solve this case, that being the revolver in Ash's hand. Or if you're really pedantic, only one, being the revolver itself. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention Ash is the murderer? I mean, it's pretty obvious, not intuitively or later on once you have more clear-cut alibis during the trial, but during the investigation, Echo figures it out for themselves and literally refuses to let it register in their mind. This is a much better approach than what happens in mainline Danganronpa, because there isn't an omission that breaks how you read internal dialogue. Here, it's obvious, no bullshit. So, if the mystery isn't going to be the main focus, what will it be? It's all about the heart. Refusing to accept Ash as the culprit, we head up to the courtroom to take her to the infirmary, and once the trial starts, we immediately focus on Vesper. Well, not Echo. Lyle gets that ball rolling on his own. For whatever reason, Vesper chooses to stay silent on the reason for her innocence, and in turn, Lyle lays it on thick. If you aren't picking it up from his dialogue, he's been getting a real protagonist syndrome, calling everyone else a piece of the puzzle. Zero remembers about his transgressions and promptly humbles him. Later on though, with the discussion at a deadlock, we get a chance to make a real decision that could lead to a bad end. If you decide to not trust Vesper and point to circumstantial evidence, the group agrees to vote for her, and promptly, she gets executed, and so does the rest of the group. At least Ash's safe though, right? Not much to it honestly. If you go on to trust her however, you'll come to realize through scrutinizing 2 things. 1, Lyle is a bum. 2, that Vesper was leaving a living quarters room on the 3rd floor, from a bracelet that she only could have got from Cyrus. None of this really guarantees her innocence though, so Echo tries to posit a different question, and is faced with the reality. Only Cyrus and Ashley could have handled the gun. But it's no use, and Echo actively becomes a hindrance to the discussion by remaining in denial. I say that, but really, the group could just move on with voting. And then, we switch over to Lyle's perspective, and the music switches over, it's all very cool. I just decided to not record audio to save space, mind you, so trust me when I say that when the music switched, I was eating this up. We have this whole sequence where we refute Echo's assertions with different characters, and it's very, very cool. None of it registers to Echo though, and we come to find out that the reason why Ashley decided to go this far was to protect Echo from Cyrus. Eve gives us a status report about her condition, and we come to find that she has complex 53. Oh my fucking god. Not like it matters though, because Echo comes to accept the fact that she's the culprit, and we vote for her. Well, Echo doesn't. They abstain. Lyle rightly gives them shit for this, but where's this high horse coming from? I gave my flowers about this chapter, but I must say, the lack of resolution for Lyle's behavior during this chapter makes his talk sound very cheap here. We come to find out about what really happened in the smoke lounge. Cyrus was luring anyone into the smoke lounge and threatened to burn it down. He was just trying to get himself killed with the whole evil shtick and take someone down with him. Ash was just unlucky. After that, she gets executed via horseshoe, and you'd think that it would escalate from the feet to the head judging by the initial misses of the horseshoe, but it eventually just kills her with one shot. I wouldn't call myself a murder snob, but this execution's a bit lacking here. We leave the courtroom and are presented with a picture from Canon, hoping that it gives us some comfort. It doesn't, and as a result, Canon tears the photo in half. Echo goes back to the room and cries their heart out, marking the end of the chapter. All in all, the strength of this chapter was mostly the groundwork of chapter 1, so I won't really touch too much on the positives of the lessons that we can take from this, because I think me and you can understand the limit of glazing a piece of art. With that preamble, let's now ask ourselves, what can we take away from this chapter? A few things. First of all, don't rush into things. Where chapter 1 had some semblance of a build-up, the second chapter, if I'm not mistaken, all takes in the span of 6 hours. I initially thought that this was a result of writing into a corner, seeing as originally, Lapse was an episodic release, but I couldn't be sure. I had actually reached out to mythridate, the creator of Lapse, to ask a few questions regarding the story writing process, among other things. They were very concise and cordial in their answers, and one question I had asked was regarding their writing process and how much of it was outlined. Their response was that the story outline was planned from start to finish, and that it was a matter of filling in the gaps, so to speak. In this case then, I don't think it was really the conditions that led to this pacing, but more so the lack of content and the how, if that makes sense. Fun fact, if you ever wonder why the characters show up next to a character you hover in the roster, it's there to signify their affinity with them. I also love that Canon just fucking hates everybody. Secondly, you actually have to show us resolution and intelligence. This sounds harsh, but as I previously mentioned with Lyle, the sequence where he and the others try to get it across to Echo feels awkward when there hasn't really been any conclusion to his own issues. This also applies to Vesper and her gambit, but to a lesser extent. Let me know if this is a nitpick or not though. I'm curious to see if I'm alone in this feeling. Lastly, at this point, why does anyone have to follow the rules? You'll see this in the next chapter, but nobody, and I mean nobody, has to risk punishment. These are very high priority issues to address in your writing, and in my opinion, the rest of these chapters are a grave reminder of why it's important to learn from your writing mistakes.
Turn off the water! Turn off the water! Turn off the water! Shut up! Turn off the water! Turn off the water!
Echo wakes up after the breakdown from yesterday, and the difference between this chapter and the next is immediate. You are offered a lot more choices. Firstly, with Sai and whether to console her or not, Forte, with how you actually feel, Vesper, whether you blame her or not, Canon, on whether or not you visit her. None of these give any route like the other visual novels do and are just there to give you limited agency. Guess which one I took? After making your decision with Vesper, Echo has a flashback with Ashley that is bittersweet to say the least. And after Echo makes their choice with Canon, they return to their room once nighttime hits, and we mark the end of day 4. We come into the dining hall and have our filling, only to realize that there's only one pastry left. We wrap it up in hopes that we could use it as a peace offering to Canon, and Echo's train of thought is interrupted by bickering outside. We come out to see that it's Lyle and Canon, arguing about the latter being passive, and Lyle at one point swipes the camera from her, threatening to break it. The rest come in from the commotion, however, and Forte takes the camera from Lyle. We come to find out that Canon had taken a secret photo of Lyle holding his own gift, and a possible puzzle that can't fit all of the board. If you flip it, there's also text that says this statement is false. Anyways, we come to find out that Forte's music sheet, the one that he was reading over when we got shocked at the opening, was one of an opera that he's not too fond of. Through that, we realize that all of these personal items were meant to offend the owner. What does Sai have, you might ask? A skull and bones. Not real, of course. We move on to the topic of the ultimate prize, a vague thing that everyone has been killing for, and Echo rightly brings up the idea of waiting until the 7th day to see what happens. Lyle shoots it down with the idea that we'd be pushed towards murder like in Chapter 1, where people would have likely been egged on by the music. One problem with that though, Zero kinda told on himself already with the punishment of Lyle breaking shit in Chapter 2. He can't really do anything major until you step into the courtroom. It's debilitating, sure, but not impossible. Zero butts in with the motive of the day, asking the group whether or not they believe in strength in numbers. In a pretty funny moment, everyone agrees without elaboration, and quickly moves on. Although, the discussion quickly goes nowhere, with the lack of information and purpose of the project or the prize. Suddenly though, we feel a rumbling throughout the dining hall, and we go to the source. The foyer doors now open. Not just that, the courtroom is now free for everyone to explore, daring us to uncover the secrets of this place. The group debates about where to go, and Lyle forces Cannon to come with her to unknown territories. Forte joins Vesper to investigate Cyrus's room, and with Sai not caring either way, Echo decides where to go. Like before with trusting Vesper, there's a chance for you to get a bad ending. I picked it first, and it's with Lyle. Compared to the bad ending that you got with Ashley, this one is much more entertaining and elongated. Before we get to exploring the unknown, a photo prints for Vesper and Cannon at their respective kiosks, and Cannon rips it out before she even sees it. I'm not sure if the emotion intended here is comedy, but the dynamic between Lyle and Cannon is probably the funniest shit ever. We search around though, but there's nothing indicating an exit. We approach a room that's been redacted, totally not named testing chambers, with the keypad requiring a code that we don't know of. Defeated, we check out the trophy room as a last Hail Mary, and we find Chekhov's armory. Outside of murder inspo though, we don't find a code. During our break however, we get an announcement that is followed by an opera piece that's likely meant to offend Forte. Again, I wish that I had recorded audio for this because this is an unsettling piece, that I'm pretty sure also peaks in audio at certain points. While it's playing, the usual suspects begin arguing about their involvement in this death game. It reaches a breaking point, and once Cannon runs for it, the lights turn off, and both Lyle and Echo die. It's a fun bad end, and we even find out the result of it, being her loss. To actually proceed with the story though, we're gonna have to join Vesper's investigation. If you think it's gonna be smooth sailing though, you're wrong. So wrong. Where Cannon immediately ripped up the photo directed towards her, Vesper instead flips it over and keeps it with her. She pries open the door, we barge in. Echo finds the floor plans for this game, and we're more or less in the dark about the floor Lyle's group is exploring, due to Cyrus probably tearing the page. In the place of that info though, we find an imprint of a code, likely for that door we couldn't open for the testing chambers. Forte, however, comes to find a dossier of every student in this death game, except for us, and that each student in this game was supposed to have a parrot, to signify their history with each other. Echo makes the connection regarding the symbols on the Game Masters with their clothing, and concludes that Sai and Pandora are letting on more than they know. Vesper decides to stay behind while Echo and Forte investigate Art's room, and we find his own personal gift, but nothing more. Turning to Pandora's room, we find absolutely nothing. Makes you wonder why her sole gift was the note itself when Sai had another one on top of that. Maybe she held onto it even in death? We return to Vesper to report these findings, and Vesper lets us know what she found. To summarize this exposition up, we're the 50th iteration of a death game that seeks to cull ultimate students in a sort of survival of the fittest manner, and probably one stripped of their ethics and morals. Vesper storms out of the room, leaving Forte and Echo in the dark about what she's planning, except for some aura farming. Her destination is the courtroom, and the two follow. The group investigates, but as you expect, nothing new is gained, only speculation about a wall with a potential opening in it. We have a sweet moment about the photo Echo tore up earlier, and the body discovery announcement crashes it all. Coming into the trophy room, we find Cannon killed by a hatchet, with Lyle missing. Before we even get any time to gather our thoughts, however, a chandelier crashes and kills Forte and Vesper in front of our eyes. Before the elevator doors close on us though, Sai stabs us and we die. Not before we hear Zero telling Sai that she doesn't want the prize. Now, the scene's pretty great, and it genuinely startled me on my first read. But there's a problem with it. Wait, why is it rewinding? Oh no. Okay, well, there's two issues with the scene. Let's just address the less infuriating one first. First, I think the BDA playing is playing fast and loose with how it works. You'd think it requires at least 3 people to make the announcement judging by the previous triggers, previous chapters, but that's not the case for this moment. I feel like it would have been appropriate to lead us to the trophy room via confronting Sai instead of the announcement moving us forward. Now, what the hell is this? The decision to have Echo skip back in time is just bizarre. You can argue that it's appropriate or thematic with their name or talent, but as you'll come to find later on, the way they use this power is just unnecessary. You can probably guess what they'll use this for, which is to actually punch in the code they learned from the imprint. In my opinion though, this is just cheap and replaces what could have been a natural discovery. You could argue that this decision is hinted at with all the Zero Escape references, but there's a difference between references and using them as plot devices. It's not that good here, and it won't get better. Anyways, now that we had that experience with Vesper, we decided to go with Lie-alaiaa instead. The dialogue here is the same until we get to the keypad where we say the code. Lie-alaiaa lashes out at us for knowing this, and Echo lashes back with their own speech. The two make up though, and Echo punches in the code. In the middle are several capsules, one of which contains Pandora's sister. She wakes up shortly after opening the pod, and after giving her the food Echo nabbed earlier, she starts talking. We come to find out that anyone put into these pods adds their personalities into the tech of this place, and that Zero is potentially planning something, considering the foyer doors being opened was his idea. We come to find out that Zero has the Despair program and... Again, what's the point of this? Putting in this piece is just bizarre, and it's not like the Despair disease was effective in its own game. It was a terrible plot point. Even if it was, this plot point is just thrown out brazenly when there already was a potential to make Zero's motivations natural and not forced. Like, Sai is right there. Anyways, we come to find out that she made the notes for Pandora, and before we can move on to the topic of removing Zero from his pod and the risks associated, Lyle's gift comes into play, and shortly after noticing Cannon left us, the lights come back on as another murder was committed. We leave Gaia to her own devices to gather more information, and we go up to the elevator to find Vesper wounded. She's not dead though, so going up to the courtroom, we find Forte dead, and Sai holding the murder weapon. Where there are more obvious contextual clues in Ashley's murder, this is probably the most extreme Lapse throws at you. You can probably solve this if you're good at reading between the lines, but most of the time, readers will probably think it's Sai or Cannon for being absent. On top of this, the accounts from Vesper and the lack of such accounts from Sai do not help the latter's case. We stay in the elevator, not moving for quite some time, until Cannon suddenly comes in, not saying much as to her whereabouts. Thus ends chapter... Huh? Not sure why it's breaking up, but alright. This time around, Gaia joins the fray, but she won't really contribute much until the end of this trial. We immediately get into the topic of where Cannon was. We come to find out that she had slipped out during our conversation with Gaia to investigate Sai since she had suspicions with her. And going up to the floor of the courtroom, Vesper gets flung inside the elevator, and she sees blood on Sai's hands as Forte disarms her. Without hesitating, she fires, and the elevator closes. It's shaky, and it doesn't help that Sai's stabbing murkies the waters even more. There's no new evidence to shed any light, so Echo decides to do the ridiculous. Take a gamble, and get themselves killed in execution, and hope they can rewind back to this moment. I'm going to be straight with you, I get the idea of this scene, but this is unfortunately Lapse's first instance of what I like to call hype moments in aura. Moments in storytelling that are not deserved from insufficient build-up and don't really do anything meaningful to the story other than to just have a cool moment. The clues you gather from this process is that Cannon is not the culprit and that everyone was murdered from fast projectile names. You can already gather that from intuition or metagaming the narrative, and the info given to you from your initial exploration of the courtroom and the wounds on Forte. This is completely unnecessary. Echo rewinds to the moment of decision, and instead implores the group to think more about it. We ask Cannon how long the darkness persisted after she fired, and we find out that the lights didn't go back on for a good minute. The suspicion turns back to Sei, and after thinking it through by ourselves, we start scrutinizing what the cause of death actually was. Echo posits the theory of incriminating Zero since he has our locations with the bracelet, and has more power within the courtroom. This is a solid theory, and it only exacerbates the route we took to get here. Like, why? We begin pressing Zero on the situation, and after a while, Sai breaks down. telling us that she's doing this to end our suffering. Sai tells us what happened, that after the elevator closed, Forte was fully intent on killing her, and Zero had intervened. With all this out in the open, Zero attempts to bring everyone down by revealing that they're on a ship, casting doubt on Gaia, and eventually attempting to execute everyone along with him. But a bright light overwhelms the courtroom, and we're left with only the survivors. Echo gets to first talk with Gaia alone to ask some questions about their talent, and we find out that it was just a gamble on Gaia's part, and Echo snaps at her for being so inconsiderate about how they would feel. The rest gather inside, and we come to find out that we are not only at the sea, but at the bottom of it. Gaia goes into further detail about the logistics of the preservation project, including borrowing the help of the ultimate psionic. By this point, I was already checked out, so this didn't break me as much as it probably should have. Like, this shit is... it sounds like it's from XCOM. Sai asks about Zero, but Gaia puts the final nail in the coffin. He is dead. We end on a conversation between Echo and Gaia heading towards the escape hatch. We roll credits, there's an epilogue scene. I won't talk your ear off about what happens regarding the trap the project has sent off those survivors or whatever. God. There is, however, a nice final scene between Ashley and Echo. I don't really have anything of note to say, I just like it. So, what can we learn from the final chapters of Lapse? Be careful with how much you take from your inspirations. I know I had more to say about how the psionic ultimate is just nonsense and how the Grand Mystery is still something you can't fuck up because it just nullifies any good you've had. But it all can be boiled down to that. The elements added based off of other games like Zero Escape and Danganronpa don't enhance the storyline the author had intended. It only detriments and serves to distract you. Ironically enough, these chapters would probably be more satisfactory if it didn't follow the same path that Uchikoshi did. I mainly blame Uchikoshi for this. All in all, Lapse is a mixed bag, and I hope I was at least succinct with the reasons as to why. I'd like to quickly thank mythridate for answering the questions I'd asked, even the ones that didn't end up in the final script. Join me next time for, oh, no.